It's 2:03 a.m. You're exhausted, your feet are bleeding, and you're scraping gum off a table for tips that won't cover rent. Then your phone rings. Unknown number. You answer expecting a bill collector. Instead, a voice colder than the grave tells you exactly what you're wearing, exactly where you're standing, and that you have something that belongs to him. You don't know it yet, but the little boy sleeping in your back room isn't just a runaway. He's the heir to the most dangerous crime family on the East Coast. And his father. He's coming for you. This is the story of Serena Miller and the night her life turned into a nightmare. The neon sign of Jerry's 24-hour diner buzzed with the irritating persistence of a trapped fly. It was a sound Serena Miller had stopped hearing 3 years ago, just like she had stopped smelling the stale coffee and burnt grease that clung to her hair like a second skin. At 24, Serena looked 30. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a fraying, messy bun, and the dark circles under her eyes were practically bruises. She wiped the counter with a rag that had seen better decades, let alone days. The diner was empty, save for old man Henderson snoring in the corner booth over a cold cup of decaf. It was a Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday. The nights bled together when you worked the graveyard shift in a part of Chicago that the tour guides pretended didn't exist. Serena glanced at the swinging metal doors leading to the kitchen. Her heart did that familiar, anxious flutter. He was back there. Leo. He was 5 years old, small for his age, with eyes so dark they looked like ink spills. Serena wasn't his mother. She wasn't his aunt. She wasn't even his legal guardian. 6 months ago, she had found him shivering behind the diner's dumpster, wrapped in a coat that cost more than her car, clutching a toy soldier. No police report matched him. No Amber Alert. Just a terrified, mute child who screamed if anyone but Serena came near him. So she did the stupidest, most dangerous thing a woman in her position could do. She hid him. She fed him grilled cheese sandwiches and let him sleep on a cot in the dry storage room while she worked and took him to her crumbling studio apartment when the sun came up. She told herself it was temporary, just until he spoke, just until she could figure out who had hurt him. The clock on the wall clicked. 2:03 a.m. The silence of the diner was shattered by the vibration of her cell phone against the Formica counter. Serena jumped, dropping the rag. She stared at the screen. Unknown caller. Usually she wouldn't answer. Creditors were like sharks. Once they smelled blood, they never stopped circling. But something about the timing, the absolute stillness of the street outside, the way the rain had just started to tap against the glass, made her skin prickle. She slid her thumb across the screen. "Hello." Her voice was raspy from disuse. Silence. Not the silence of a dead line, but the silence of a held breath. A presence. "Serena Miller," a voice said. It wasn't a question. The voice was deep, smooth, and terrified her instantly. It sounded like expensive whiskey poured over broken glass. It was a voice of absolute authority. "Who is this?" Serena gripped the phone tighter, her knuckles turning white. "If this is about the electric bill I sent the check on, look out the window, Serena." Her blood turned to ice. She slowly lifted her head. Through the rain-streaked glass beyond the flickering neon sign, the street was usually empty this time of night. Now it was lined with black SUVs. 3 of them. Idling silently, their headlights off like predators lying in wait. "What do you want?" she whispered instinctively, backing away from the counter, moving toward the kitchen doors. Toward Leo. "You have something of mine," the man on the phone said. His tone didn't fluctuate. There was no anger, just a chilling matter-of-factness. "And I'm coming in to get him." "I don't know what you're talking about," Serena lied, her voice trembling. "I'm calling the police. The police won't come to this zip code for less than a double homicide, Serena. We both know that. Besides," the line clicked and the voice dropped an octave, intimate and terrifying. "I own the police." The front door of the diner chimed. Serena didn't wait. She dropped the phone and bolted for the kitchen. She burst through the swinging doors, her shoes slipping on the greasy tile. "Leo," she hissed. The boy was sitting on a sack of potatoes, his knees pulled to his chest, drawing on the back of a placemat. He looked up, his dark eyes wide. He sensed her fear immediately. It was a language he spoke fluently. "We have to go," Serena gasped, grabbing his small hand. "Now!" She dragged him toward the back exit, the heavy steel door that led to the alley. Her hands shook so badly, she fumbled with the deadbolt. Come on. She threw the bolt back and shoved the door open, only to run straight into a wall of muscle. A man stood in the alleyway. He was massive, wearing a suit that cost more than the diner itself. He didn't look like a thug. He looked like a soldier. He blocked the exit completely. Serena stumbled back, pulling Leo behind her legs. She looked around frantically for a weapon, a frying pan, a knife, anything. "Don't," the man in the alley said. He raised his hands, palms open. "Boss wants you alive. Don't make me change the play." "Let us go," Serena screamed, backing up until she hit the prep table. The kitchen doors behind her swung open. Serena spun around. The man who entered didn't look like the others. He wasn't just muscle. He was the center of gravity in the room. He was tall, with hair the color of midnight, and a jawline that looked carved from granite. He wore a charcoal three-piece suit, tailored to perfection, untouched by the rain. But it was his eyes that stopped Serena's heart. They were the same color as Leo's, dark, intelligent, and currently burning with a restrained fury. This wasn't just a gangster. This was Salvatore Rossi. Even Serena, who avoided the news, knew the name. The FBI called him the Teflon Don of Chicago. The streets just called him the Wolf, and he was staring right at the child cowering behind her legs. "Matteo," Salvatore said. His voice was the one from the phone. Leo peeked out from behind Serena's jeans. He didn't scream. He didn't run. He stared at the man with a mixture of recognition and terror. "Step aside, Miss Miller," Salvatore said, taking a slow step forward. "No." The word left Serena's mouth before she could think about the consequences. She grabbed a boning knife from the magnetic strip on the wall and held it out with a shaking hand. The giant in the doorway behind her snorted, reaching for his holster. Salvatore raised a hand, stopping his man, without even looking at him. He tilted his head, studying Serena. He looked at the trembling knife, then at her fierce, terrified eyes. "You're shaking," Salvatore noted softly. "You've never held a knife in anger, have you?" "I'll use it," Serena vowed, though she felt like she might vomit. "You're not taking him. I don't care who you are." Salvatore's expression shifted. For a microsecond, the cold mask slipped, revealing something like surprise, maybe even respect. "He is my son," Salvatore said, "and you are currently kidnapping him." "I found him in the trash," Serena yelled, tears of adrenaline stinging her eyes. "I found him starving and freezing while you were doing whatever the hell you do." "You weren't here. I was—" The air in the kitchen grew heavy. The giant at the back door tensed, waiting for the order to put a bullet in her. Salvatore looked at Leo. "Matteo, come here." Leo didn't move. He gripped Serena's leg tighter, burying his face in her apron. The rejection hit Salvatore like a physical blow. Serena saw the flinch in his jaw. The most powerful man in the city, rejected by his own flesh and blood, for a waitress who smelled like onions. Salvatore's eyes snapped back to Serena. The curiosity was gone, replaced by a ruthless resolve. "I'm not asking again," he said, stepping into the knife's range. "Put it down, or my men will hurt you. And I don't want my son to see that." Serena hesitated. She looked at the giant behind her, then at Salvatore. She was trapped. "I'm not leaving him," she whispered. Salvatore stopped. He looked at her, really looked at her, analyzing her utility. "Fine," he said coldly. "Then you come too." Before Serena could react, he signaled. The giant behind her moved with impossible speed. A cloth was pressed over her mouth, the smell of chemicals. The boning knife clattered to the floor. The last thing Serena saw was Salvatore Rossi kneeling down, picking up Leo as gently as if he were made of glass while the world faded to black. Serena woke up to the smell of leather and expensive cologne. Her head throbbed in a rhythm that matched the hum of the engine. She kept her eyes closed for a moment, letting her senses calibrate. She wasn't bound, but she was moving. Fast. She snapped her eyes open. She was in the back of a car, no a limousine. The interior was spacious, lit by soft, ambient LEDs. The windows were tinted pitch black. She couldn't see the city, only her own pale reflection. She sat up with a gasp. "Leo. He's asleep." Serena whipped her head to the left. Salvatore Rossi was sitting on the opposite bench seat, a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He had shed his suit jacket. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a hint of a tattoo on his chest. He looked tired. Human. Next to him, curled up on the plush leather seat, with his head resting on Salvatore's thigh, was Leo. The boy was fast asleep, his thumb in his mouth, a habit he only did when he felt safe. Or exhausted. Serena's instinct was to lung for the boy, but the logical part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive on the streets, slammed on the brakes. She was in a moving vehicle with a mafia boss. Violence was a language she couldn't win at here. "Where are you taking us?" Serena demanded, pulling her knees to her chest. She realized she was still in her grease-stained uniform. She felt filthy next to the pristine luxury of the car. "Home," Salvatore said, taking a sip of his drink. "My home. Not the dump you were keeping him in." "That dump was the only roof he had," Serena snapped. "Where were you?" "Where were you for 6 months?" Salvatore's grip on the glass tightened. "That is a complex question. Try me. I'm a waitress. I'm good at multitasking." Salvatore stared at her. "You have a sharp tongue, Miss Miller. Usually people in your position spend this ride begging for their lives." "I don't care about my life," Serena said, and she meant it. "I care about him. He doesn't know you. He's terrified of loud noises. He's allergic to strawberries. He needs a nightlight or he screams until he throws up." "Do you know any of that?" Salvatore looked down at the sleeping boy. His hand hovered over Leo's hair, trembling slightly before he pulled it back. "I know," Salvatore said, his voice rough. "I know he likes to draw. I know his middle name is Dante. I know his mother." He stopped, his jaw clenching. "Where is his mother?" Serena asked softly. The temperature in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees. Salvatore looked up, and his eyes were voids. "She's the reason he was in that alley," he said. "And she is no longer a concern." The implication hung in the air, heavy and violent. Serena swallowed hard. "Why bring me?" she asked. "You have him. You can toss me out on the side of the highway." "I considered it," Salvatore admitted. "But you saw how he reacted in the kitchen. He trusts you. He clings to you like a lifeline. If I separate you two now, the trauma could be permanent. The doctors advised stability. Doctors, I have a medical team waiting at the estate. He needs to be checked. And so do you. I'm fine. You look malnourished, Salvatore observed clinically. And you have a bruise on your arm, from my guard or from before. Serena self-consciously covered her arm. Whatever. The car began to slow down. The sound of gravel crunching under tires replaced the hum of asphalt. Listen to me closely, Serena, Salvatore said, leaning forward. The predator was back. You are entering a world you do not understand. You are a guest in my home, because my son needs you. But make no mistake, you are not free. You do not leave until I say you leave. You do not speak to anyone outside the gates. If you try to run with him again... He didn't finish the threat. He didn't have to. I won't leave him, Serena said defiantly. Good. The car stopped. The door opened and cool night air rushed in. Serena stepped out and gasped. They weren't just at a house. They were at a fortress. A sprawling stone estate that looked like it had been airlifted from the Italian countryside and dropped into the Illinois woodlands. High walls topped with cameras and razor wire surrounded the perimeter. Men with assault rifles patrolled the grounds. It was beautiful. It was a prison. Salvatore stepped out, carrying the sleeping Leo in his arms. He walked toward the massive oak front doors without waiting for Serena. Welcome to the Rossi estate, a voice said beside her. Serena jumped. It was the giant from the alley. Up close, he looked even scarier. A jagged scar ran down his cheek. I'm Dominic, he grunted. Don't try anything stupid, and we'll get along fine. Serena wrapped her thin cardigan tighter around herself. She looked at the fortress, then at Salvatore's retreating back. She had stepped out of the frying pan and into the fire. But as she watched Leo's small head resting on his father's shoulder, she knew she would walk into hell if it meant keeping that boy safe. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and followed the Mafia Don into the lion's den. Inside the house was a museum of wealth. Marble floors, chandeliers that cost more than Serena would earn in 10 lifetimes, and art that belonged in the Louvre. But it was cold. It felt empty. Salvatore carried Leo up a sweeping staircase. Serena followed her sneakers, squeaking on the marble. They entered a room that had clearly been prepared for a child. It was filled with toys, expensive, unopened toys, a bed shaped like a race car, a mural of the solar system on the ceiling. Salvatore gently laid Leo on the bed. He pulled the duvet up, tucking him in, with a tenderness that contradicted everything Serena knew about him. He stood there for a long moment, just watching the boy breathe. He's been gone for 194 days, Salvatore whispered. It wasn't directed at Serena. It was a confession to the room. Who took him? Serena asked, standing in the doorway. Salvatore turned. His face was a mask of stone again. Someone I trusted, he said. Someone who is going to pay slowly. He walked past her, stopping just inches from her face. She could smell the whiskey and the danger radiating off him. Your room is next door, he said. There are clothes in the closet. Clean yourself up. We have dinner in an hour. It's 4 a.m., Serena said. In my house we eat when the work is done, and tonight the work is just beginning. He walked away down the dark hallway. Serena went into the adjoining room. It was larger than her entire apartment. She walked to the window and looked out. The estate was swarming with guards. There was no way out. She went into the bathroom and turned on the shower. As the hot water hit her skin, scrubbing away the diner grease and the fear, she made a silent vow. Salvatore Rossi might own the police. He might own the city. He might think he owned her. But he didn't know Serena Miller. She had survived abusive foster homes, homelessness, and starvation. She was a survivor, and she was going to find out exactly what was going on in this house, why Leo's mother was no longer a concern, and how to get Leo out of this gilded cage. She stepped out of the shower and wrapped a towel around herself. She opened the closet door. It wasn't empty. It was filled with dresses, silk velvet satin, all in her size. Serena froze. He hadn't just prepared a room for Leo. He had prepared a room for her. A chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. This wasn't just a rescue mission. Salvatore Rossi had been watching her for a long time. She reached out and touched a red silk dress. Pinned to the hanger was a note on heavy cardstock. "Wear this. S." Serena stared at the note. The game had begun. Serena stood in front of the floor-length mirror, staring at a stranger. The red silk dress fit like a second skin, draping over her curves in a way that felt both empowering and violating. It had a high slit up the thigh and a neckline that plunged just enough to be dangerous. It was beautiful. It was a costume. She felt the heavy cardstock note in her palm one last time. Wear this before crumpling it and tossing it into the wastebasket. "I'm not doing this for you," she whispered to her reflection. "I'm doing this so I don't get shot." She opened the door and stepped into the hallway. It was silent, the kind of silence that felt pressurized like the air before a thunderstorm. A guard stood at the end of the corridor, Dominic, the scarred giant from the alley. He looked her up and down, his expression unreadable. "This way. Boss is waiting." He led her down the grand staircase through a foyer that could fit her entire apartment building, and into a dining room, lit only by a massive crystal chandelier and the flickering light of a fireplace. The table was long enough to seat 20, but only 2 places were set. One at the head, and one immediately to its right. Salvatore Rossi stood by the fireplace, swirling a glass of red wine. He had changed, too. The suit was gone, replaced by black dress slacks and a black button-down shirt. Sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms crisscrossed with faint scars. He turned as she entered. His dark eyes locked onto her, traveling from her face to the hem of the dress and back up. The air in the room seemed to ignite. "Red," he said, his voice low and vibrating through the floorboards. "It suits you. Better than the grease and polyester." "I paid for that polyester with my own money," Serena shot back, gripping the back of the velvet chair. "Which is more than I can say for this." Salvatore's lips quirked a ghost of a smile. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Serena sat. Servants materialized from the shadows, silent, efficient ghosts in uniforms. They placed plates of rare steak and truffle risotto in front of them. The smell was intoxicating. Serena's stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. She hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. Salvatore didn't mock her. He simply picked up his knife and fork. "Eat. You're no good to Matteo if you pass out." Serena cut a piece of steak. It melted in her mouth. She tried to eat slowly to maintain some dignity, but the hunger was primal. "You checked my background," she said between bites, keeping her eyes on her plate. "That's how you knew my size. That's how you knew about the dress." "I check everyone who breathes the same air as my son," Salvatore replied calmly. "Serena Miller, born in Ohio. Mother died when you were 6. Father unknown. Entered the foster system a week later. 6 homes in 10 years. Serena's knife screeched against the china. She looked up, her eyes blazing. "You have no right." "I have every right," Salvatore said, his voice hardening. "I know about the time you broke a foster father's nose with a lamp because he touched you. I know you ran away at 16 and lived in a library basement for a month. I know you've never taken a handout, and you've never filed a police report. He took a sip of wine, his gaze piercing her soul. You're a fighter, Serena. That's why I brought you here. Most people would have called the cops on a stray kid. You protected him. You fought for him. He was scared, Serena said, her voice dropping. He didn't trust anyone. He reminded me of me. Salvatore set his glass down. The movement was sharp. Matteo is not a stray. He is a Rossi. He is royalty in this city. He didn't look like royalty when I found him eating apple cores out of a dumpster, Serena snapped. The silence that followed was deafening. The servants retreated against the walls. Salvatore's face darkened, a storm cloud passing over the sun. I know, he whispered. The pain in his voice was so raw it startled her. The man who took him, he was my brother. Serena froze. Your brother. Half-brother. Carlo. He wanted the throne. He thought if he took my heart. He gestured toward the ceiling, toward Leo's room. I would crumble. He didn't realize that taking my son doesn't make me weak. It makes me a monster. He leaned forward, reaching across the table. Serena flinched, but he only took her hand. His skin was rough, calloused, hot against her cold fingers. Carlo is dead, Salvatore said, his thumb grazing her knuckles. I killed him with my own hands 3 hours before I called you. But his network, his rats, they are still hiding in the walls. That is why you are here. Matteo trusts you. And until I burn the rest of the rats out of my city, you are the only safe harbor he has. Serena pulled her hand away, her heart hammering against her ribs. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a war, and she had just been drafted. What about his mother? Serena asked. You said she was no longer a concern. Did she help Carlo? Salvatore's expression shut down. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the granite mask. Isabella made her choices, he said coldly. Eat your steak, Serena. It's getting cold. The dinner continued in silence, but the air was charged. Every time Serena looked up, she found Salvatore watching her, not with the cold calculation of a boss, but with the hungry intensity of a man who had been alone in the dark for a very long time. As the plates were cleared, Salvatore stood up. Go to sleep. Tomorrow you meet the family. And Serena. She paused at the door. Yes. Lock your door. She turned around confused. Why, I thought I was safe here. Salvatore's eyes were shadowed. You are safe from the world outside, but inside these walls, everyone has an agenda. Trust no one but me. Do you understand? I understand. She lied. She didn't trust him either. Not yet. Serena did not sleep. The bed was softer than clouds. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, but her mind was a whirlwind of adrenaline and fear. She had pushed the heavy mahogany dresser in front of her bedroom door. Salvatore's warning. Lock your door played on a loop in her head. At 3 a.m., the house was silent, but it was a house of secrets, and secrets rarely slept. Serena got up, pulling a silk robe over her nightgown. She needed water. She needed to move. But mostly, she needed to check on Leo. She moved the dresser aside with a quiet grunt and slipped into the hallway. The guard was gone, likely on a rotation switch. She crept to the door next to hers and cracked it open. Leo was there, a small lump under the duvet. The nightlight cast a soft blue glow over the room. He was sleeping soundly, clutching the toy soldier she had given him months ago. Seeing him safe loosened the knot in her chest slightly. She closed the door and turned to go back to her room, but a flicker of light at the end of the hall caught her eye. It was the west wing of the house. Salvatore hadn't explicitly forbidden it, but the architecture itself screamed off-limits. The hallway was darker, the portraits on the wall older, sterner. Curiosity, the trait that had gotten her into this mess, pulled her forward. She walked barefoot on the carpet, making no sound. The light was coming from a slightly ajar door at the very end of the corridor. As she got closer, she heard voices, low, urgent whispers. "Too risky. The girl is a liability," a male voice hissed. It wasn't Salvatore. It was higher Redia. "Salvatore is blinded by the boy," another voice replied. Deep, gravelly. "He thinks she's a savior. We can use that." Serena pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath. And if she knows something, if the boy told her where Carlo hid the ledger— "The boy is mute, you idiot. He hasn't spoken a word in 6 months. He speaks to her." Serena's blood ran cold. They were talking about her, and Leo. She risked a glance through the crack in the door. It was a study lined with books. 2 men stood by a desk. One was Dominic the giant. The discovery hit Serena like a physical blow. Dominic, the man Salvatore trusted to guard his door. The other man was slimmer, wearing glasses and a sharp grey suit. He looked like an accountant, but his eyes were cruel. "We wait," the accountant said. "Let Salvatore think he's won. When the shipment arrives on Friday, we make the move. If the girl gets in the way—" He drew a finger across his throat. Dominic nodded his scarred face, impassive. "And the boss? If he doesn't fall in line, he joins his brother." Serena clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. She stumbled back, her foot catching the edge of a rug. Thump. Inside the room, the voices stopped instantly. "What was that?" the accountant snapped. Serena didn't wait. She spun around and sprinted. She didn't care about the noise anymore. She ran down the dark corridor, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would explode. "Hey!" A shout echoed behind her. Heavy footsteps thundered on the floorboards. Dominic was coming. She reached her room and threw herself inside, slamming the door and locking it. She shoved the dresser back in front of it, her muscles screaming with effort. Seconds later, the doorknob jiggled. Then a heavy thud as a shoulder hit the wood. "Miss Miller!" Dominic's voice came through the door. It was calm, terrifyingly polite. "Is everything all right?" Serena backed away, grabbing a heavy brass lamp from the bedside table. She couldn't speak. If she answered, she admitted she was awake. She admitted she heard them. "Must have been a draft," Dominic muttered mostly to himself. She heard him linger for a moment, his breathing heavy on the other side of the wood. Then finally his footsteps retreated. Serena sank to the floor, clutching the lamp to her chest. She was shaking uncontrollably. Salvatore had told her to trust no one but him. He had been right. His own right-hand man was plotting to kill him. She looked around the room, feeling the walls closing in. She was trapped in a fortress with traitors at the gate and traitors in the hall. She had to tell Salvatore. But would he believe her? Dominic had been with him for years. She was just the waitress he picked up yesterday. As she sat there, trying to steady her breathing, her eyes fell on the bedside table. There was something there that hadn't been there before. A small folded piece of paper. Serena crawled over and picked it up. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. It wasn't a note from Salvatore this time. The handwriting was jagged, hurried. Curiosity killed to the cat Serena. Keep your mouth shut about what you see, or the boy pays the price first. It wasn't signed. Serena dropped the note as if it were burning. They had been in her room, while she was at dinner or while she was in the shower. She looked at the door leading to Leo's room. She stood up, her fear crystallizing into cold, hard resolve. They threatened her. Fine. She was used to threats. But they just threatened Leo. Serena Miller grabbed the brass lamp. She wasn't going to hide anymore. She needed to find Salvatore, and she needed to find him now. Even if she had to burn this whole house down to get to him. She moved the dresser aside again. She opened the door. The hallway was empty. She stepped out, the lamp raised like a club, and headed into the darkness of the mansion to find the wolf. Serena moved through the hallway like a shadow. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold marble, and her grip on the heavy brass lamp was white-knuckled. The house was a labyrinth of shadows, but she had an instinct for finding the center of power, and in this house, the center was Salvatore. She found the double doors at the end of the east wing. No guards. That was wrong. There were guards everywhere else. She didn't knock. She turned the handle, praying it was unlocked. It turned. Serena slipped inside, closing the door softly behind her. The room was vast, dominated by a king-sized bed, but the bed was empty. The only light came from the balcony, where the curtains were drawn back, letting in the moonlight. "Give me one reason not to put a bullet in your chest." The voice came from the darkness of a wing-back chair in the corner. Serena froze. She heard the distinct, terrifying click of a hammer being pulled back on a revolver. "It's me," she whispered, her voice shaking but clear. "Serena." "I know who you are," Salvatore said. He didn't lower the gun. "I asked for a reason. You're wandering my house at 3 a.m. with a weapon." "This lamp?" Serena asked, holding it up slightly. "This is for Dominic." There was a pause, a heavy silence. Then the lamp beside the chair clicked on. Salvatore sat there shirtless, a glass of whiskey on the table, and a black Sig Sauer pointed at her heart. His chest was covered in scars, knife wounds, bullet grazes, a tapestry of violence. His eyes were bloodshot. "Dominic," Salvatore repeated, his voice dangerously low. "My head of security. The man who took a bullet for me in Miami. You want to hit him with a lamp? He's betraying you," Serena blurted out. She stepped forward into the light. "I heard him, in the West Wing study. He was with a man. Skinny glasses, grey suit." Salvatore's eyes narrowed. "Felix, my accountant." "They're planning something." Serena rushed on the words, tumbling out. "They talked about a shipment on Friday. They said you were blinded by the boy. And they said if you didn't fall in line, you'd join your brother." Salvatore slowly lowered the gun. His face was unreadable, a mask of stone, but a muscle in his jaw jumped. "And you came to tell me," he said, "instead of running." "I tried to run once," Serena said, thinking of the alley. "It didn't work out. Besides..." She reached into the pocket of her robe and pulled out the crumpled note. She tossed it onto the small table beside him. Salvatore picked it up. He read the jagged handwriting. Curiosity killed the cat. When he looked up, the temperature in the room seemed to drop below freezing. The exhaustion in his eyes was gone, replaced by a terrifying, cold clarity. "They came into your room," he said softly. "It wasn't a question. Someone did, while I was in the shower or at dinner." Salvatore stood up. He towered over her, radiating heat and anger. But the anger wasn't directed at her. He walked to a panel on the wall and punched in a code. A screen flared to life, showing the security camera feeds. "Dominic controls the grid," Salvatore muttered, his eyes scanning the screens. If he turned, he would loop the footage. He tapped a screen showing the West Wing hallway. It showed an empty corridor. The timestamp said 3:12:45. Salvatore watched it for 10 seconds. The timestamp ticked up, but in the background of the video, a curtain fluttered. 10 seconds later, the exact same curtain fluttered in the exact same way. "A loop!" Salvatore hissed. He turned to a safe hidden behind a painting, spinning the dial with precision. "You were right." He pulled out a tactical vest and a second gun. He tossed the vest to Serena. "Put this on." "What now?" Serena fumbled with the heavy Kevlar. "I thought they said Friday." "Friday is the shipment," Salvatore said, racking the slide of his pistol. "The coup happens before the money comes in. If they threatened you tonight, it means they're accelerating. They know you saw something." He walked over to her. For a moment, he stopped. He reached out and adjusted the straps of the vest on her shoulders, his hands lingering for a fraction of a second. "I need you to listen to me," he said, his voice intense. "Go to Matteo's room. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. If anyone else comes in—" He handed her a small, wicked-looking knife from his boot. "You aim for the neck." I can't kill anyone," Serena stammered. "You're a mother now, Serena," Salvatore said, his dark eyes boring into hers. "Whether you birthed him or not, you protect the cub. That is what we do." "We." The word hung in the air. Suddenly, the lights in the room died. The entire estate plunged into darkness. The hum of the air conditioning stopped. The electronic locks on the doors clicked open as the power failed. "It's starting," Salvatore whispered in the dark. He grabbed her arm. "Forget the room. We don't have time. They're already inside." The hallway was a cavern of shadows. The only light came from the lightning storm brewing outside, flashing intermittently through the tall windows, casting long skeletal shapes across the walls. Salvatore moved with a terrifying grace, his gun raised. Serena followed close behind, clutching the knife he had given her, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Dominic knows the protocols," Salvatore whispered, barely audible. "He knows I'd go for Matteo first. He'll have men waiting." "So what do we do?" Serena hissed. "We change the play." They reached the top of the grand staircase. Below in the foyer, flashlight beams cut through the darkness. Men were shouting. The sound of boots on marble echoed up to them. "Clear the ground floor," a voice shouted. It was Dominic. "Find the girl. Make it look like an accident. I'll handle the boss." Serena felt a surge of nausea. Hearing her death ordered so casually was a different kind of terror. Salvatore pulled her back into the shadows of the landing. "There are too many downstairs. We need to get to the panic room. It's behind the library, in the West Wing." The West Wing. That's where they were. Exactly. It's the last place they'll look for us right now. They think we're cornered in the bedrooms. They doubled back, moving toward the servants. Staircase, a narrow wooden flight of stairs, hidden behind a panel in the wall. It was tight-smelling of old dust and cedar. They emerged on the first floor near the kitchen. The house was chaotic. Gunshots echoed from the upper levels, Salvatore's loyal guards, the few that were left fighting back. "Stay low," Salvatore commanded. They crept through the kitchen. Serena saw the prep table where she had first challenged him. It felt like a lifetime ago. Suddenly the kitchen door swung open. A man in tactical gear stepped in, a flashlight mounted on his rifle sweeping the room. Serena and Salvatore were crouched behind the butcher block island. Salvatore signaled her to stay down. He waited, his breathing completely silent. The beam of light passed over their heads. The man took a step forward. Salvatore exploded from his crouch. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Salvatore grabbed the barrel of the rifle, forcing it up, and drove his elbow into the man's throat. The man crumbled. Salvatore stripped him of his radio and earpiece before he hit the floor. "Wolf is down," a voice crackled in the earpiece. "I repeat, Wolf is down." We have control of the master bedroom." Salvatore put the earpiece in. "They think I'm dead," he whispered to Serena. "Good." "Where is Leo?" Serena asked, panic rising. "He's still upstairs." "No," Salvatore said. "Matteo isn't in his room. I moved him before dinner." Serena stared at him. "What? I told you I trust no one," Salvatore said, checking the magazine of the captured rifle. "He's in the dumbwaiter shaft. It's reinforced steel. He has blankets and his headphones. He's safe." Serena let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "You're a paranoid lunatic. And that is why my son is still alive. Come." They moved out of the kitchen and into the library. This was where Serena had heard the voices earlier. The room smelled of old paper and betrayal. Salvatore went to a bookshelf lined with encyclopedias. He reached for a specific volume. "Don't move," a voice boomed from the doorway. Salvatore froze. Serena spun around. Dominic stood there. He wasn't alone. He had 2 men with him, their weapons trained on Salvatore's chest. Dominic held a flashlight, the beam illuminating his scarred face. He looked almost regretful. "I knew you wouldn't be in bed, Sal," Dominic said. "You never sleep." "Et tu brute," Salvatore said dryly, not turning around. He kept his hand near the bookshelf. "Don't quote Shakespeare at me," Dominic spat. "This is business. You're weak, Sal. You let the grief eat you. You let a waitress live. You're not the wolf anymore. You're a domesticated dog." "And you," Salvatore said slowly, turning around to face him, "are a man who forgot who pays for his suits. The cartel pays better." Dominic shrugged. "Kill him. Keep the girl. We might need her to get the kid out of the walls." The 2 men raised their rifles. Serena didn't think. She acted. She was standing near the heavy mahogany desk. On it sat a crystal decanter of scotch. She grabbed it and hurled it not at the men, but at the fireplace to her right. The glass shattered against the stone hearth. The alcohol splashed over the dying embers of the fire. Whoosh! A fireball erupted, flaring bright and sudden in the dark room. It was only a distraction, a split second of blinding light and surprise. But for a man like Salvatore Rossi, a split second was an eternity. Bang! Bang! 2 shots rang out before the glass even hit the floor. The 2 gunmen dropped holes in their foreheads. Dominic roared, firing blindly as he dove behind a leather sofa. Salvatore grabbed Serena by the waist and threw her behind the solid oak desk. Bullets shredded the books above their heads, sending confetti of paper raining down on them. "You have a good arm," Salvatore yelled over the noise. "I was a softball pitcher in high school," Serena yelled back, covering her head. "Stay down!" Salvatore popped up, firing 3 controlled shots toward the sofa. Dominic returned fire, the bullets chunking into the wood of the desk. "You can't win, Sal," Dominic shouted. "I have 20 men outside. The house is ours. You have 20 men," Salvatore called back. His voice calm, reloading his pistol. "But you forgot one thing, Dom." "Yeah, what's that? You're standing on the rug?" Serena looked at Salvatore. He pulled a small remote from his pocket, the one he had taken from the guard in the kitchen. No, it wasn't a radio remote. It was a trigger. He pressed the button. A trapdoor beneath the rug in the center of the room, directly where Dominic was taking cover behind the sofa, snapped open with a hydraulic hiss. Dominic shouted as the floor fell away beneath him. He tumbled into the darkness of the sub-basement wine cellar, landing with a sickening crunch 10 feet below. Salvatore stood up and walked to the edge of the pit. He looked down. Dominic was groaning, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle. "The panicked room," Salvatore said to Serena. "I never liked the West Wing anyway." He grabbed Serena's hand. "We have to get Matteo. The rest of them will be coming." They ran back toward the kitchen, toward the dumbwaiter. But as they reached the hallway, the front doors of the estate blew open. Blue and red lights flooded the foyer. Sirens wailed. "Police!" A voice amplified by a megaphone boomed. "Drop your weapons!" Serena felt a wave of relief. "The police! They're here!" She moved to step forward, but Salvatore yanked her back so hard she stumbled. "No!" He hissed, his face pale. "Why, they can help us!" "Serena, look at the uniforms," Salvatore said, pointing through the window. Serena squinted against the flashing lights. The cars weren't Chicago PD. They were black SUVs with no markings. The men swarming the lawn wore SWAT gear, but there were no badges, no insignia. "That's not the police," Salvatore said, his voice grim. "That's the cleanup crew. Dominic wasn't working alone. He called in the competition." They were trapped, traitors inside, an army outside, and a 5-year-old boy hiding in the walls. Salvatore looked at Serena. For the first time, she saw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for what he was about to ask her to do. "I can't carry Matteo and fight them off," he said. "I need to draw their fire. I'm going to lead them to the East Wing." "What about us?" Serena asked, tears welling up. "You get Matteo. There is a tunnel in the pantry. It leads to the garage. Take the black Audi. The keys are in the wheel well." "I'm not leaving you. You have to." Salvatore grabbed her face in his hands. The contact was electric. "You are the only one he trusts. If I die, he dies. Save him, Serena. Please." He leaned in and kissed her. It was hard, desperate, and tasted of blood and whiskey. Then he pulled away, turned and fired a shot into the air. "Over here!" he roared at the intruders. "Come and get me!" He sprinted toward the main staircase, drawing the fire of the incoming soldiers. Serena didn't watch him go. She turned and ran for the kitchen, praying she could get the boy out before the wolf ran out of luck. Serena burst into the kitchen, the sounds of gunfire echoing from the East Wing like distant thunder. Salvatore was drawing them away, buying her seconds with his life. She scrambled to the dumbwaiter panel and tapped the code Salvatore had whispered to her once days ago. The steel doors slid open. Leo was huddled in the corner of the small shaft, his knees pulled to his chest, headphones clamped over his ears. When he saw Serena, his eyes flooded with tears. He didn't speak, but he launched himself into her arms, burying his face in her neck. "I've got you," she whispered, lifting him out. He was heavy, but adrenaline made him feel light as a feather. "We're playing the quiet game now. Okay, super quiet." She carried him into the pantry. Behind a rack of canned tomatoes, she found the latch. The floor grated open to reveal a concrete staircase, plunging into darkness. "Hold on tight," she murmured. She descended into the damp air of the tunnel. It was narrow, smelling of earth and gasoline. She ran her bare feet, slapping against the cold concrete. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, a nightmare birth canal, leading them out of the fortress. Finally, they reached a heavy steel door. Serena pushed it open and stumbled into the cool night air of the garage. It was a separate structure away from the main house. The black Audi R8 sat there, sleek and menacing. She opened the back door and shoved Leo in, buckling him with shaking hands. "Stay down," she ordered. She scrambled into the driver's seat. The key fob was in the wheel well, just as Salvatore promised. She jammed her finger against the start button. The engine roared to life, but as the headlights flared on, they illuminated a figure standing in front of the garage door. It was the accountant, Felix. He held a pistol, leveling it at the windshield. "Going somewhere, Miss Miller?" He sneered, his voice thin and triumphant. Serena froze. She put the car in gear, her foot hovering over the gas. If she drove forward, he'd shoot. If she stayed, they were dead. Felix took a step closer. Turn off the engine. The boy comes with me. You die here." Serena looked in the rearview mirror. Leo was curled in a ball. She looked at Felix. She thought of the knife in her boot. You protect the cub. Serena revved the engine. She wasn't going to turn it off. She was going to run him down. But before she could release the brake, a shadow detached itself from the darkness behind Felix. A single shot rang out, not from Felix's gun, but from the darkness. Felix stiffened. A red bloom appeared on his chest. He crumbled to the concrete without a sound. Salvatore stepped into the light. He looked like he had walked through hell. His shirt was torn, soaked in blood at the shoulder. He was limping, but the gun in his hand was steady, and his eyes were burning with a fierce, terrifying light. He walked to the driver's side window. Serena rolled it down, sobbing with relief. "You're alive," she choked out. "I told you." Salvatore grunted, wincing as he opened the door. "Move over. You're shot. It's a graze. Move." Serena scrambled over the center console into the passenger seat. Salvatore slid behind the wheel. He didn't look at the dead man on the floor. He punched the garage door opener. As the door rolled up, revealing the chaotic night, Salvatore looked at her. He reached out with a bloody hand and cupped her cheek, smearing a streak of crimson on her skin. "You did good," he said roughly. "Now hold on." He slammed the car into gear. The Audi shrieked tires smoking and shot out of the garage. They tore down the back driveway, smashing through the wooden perimeter fence, and disappeared into the tree line, just as the house behind them erupted in flames. 6 months later, the villa sat on a cliff overlooking the Amalfi Coast. The air smelled of lemons and sea salt, a world away from the grease of Chicago and the gunpowder of that terrible night. Serena sat on the terrace, watching the sunset bleed orange and purple into the sea. She wore a white sundress, and her hair was loose golden in the fading light. She looked younger now. The dark circles were gone. "Look, Serena. Look." She turned. Leo ran across the terrace, holding up a drawing. "It's a boat," he shouted, grinning. He spoke now. It had taken months of therapy, months of nightmares, but the silence had finally broken. "It's beautiful, Matteo," Serena said, pulling him into a hug. "Where is Papa?" "I'm here." Salvatore stepped out onto the terrace. He wore a linen shirt and sunglasses, looking less like a mob boss and more like a man at peace. But the scar on his shoulder was a permanent reminder of the price he had paid. He had burned his empire to the ground that night. He had left the ruins for the police and the vultures taking only what mattered: his son and the woman who saved them. The world thought Salvatore Rossi was dead. The wolf was a ghost story now. He walked over and picked Leo up, swinging him around until the boy giggled. Then he set him down. "Go wash up for dinner." Leo ran inside. Salvatore sat next to Serena, taking her hand. He kissed her knuckles, then her palm. "Happy?" he asked quietly. Serena looked at the sea, then at the man who had kidnapped her, terrified her, and ultimately loved her. "We're safe," she said. "Safety is an illusion," Salvatore corrected her, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "But we are together, and God help anyone who tries to change that." Serena smiled, leaning in to kiss him. The waitress was gone. The survivor remained, and she was finally home. And that is the story of how a late-night call changed everything for Serena Miller. She went from serving coffee to surviving a war, proving that sometimes the strongest people aren't the ones holding the guns. They're the ones with everything to lose. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more twisted romances, mafia thrillers, and dramatic storytelling. Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. What would you do if you received that call at 2 a.m.? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.